All right. We're doing this again?
Yeah. Don't put that in the video.
Hello. Welcome. We're back. Episode 2 of the Reconnect Self podcast with Tracey Quayle. I am your host. My name is Scott. I'm Tracey's husband. I'm a filmmaker. Tracey is a counsellor. And together we run our Reconnect Self retreats here in Perth, which is in Western Australia. And the podcast is basically around helping you to rediscover what brings you joy. It's about self-care, self-love, and everything in between. And today's episode is all about anxiety, which we both know quite a lot about. Me, because I guess I've suffered from it definitely twice. And you, because you spent 20 years working with people who are having to deal with it. So first, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Very well.
I know how you are. All right.
And we've got Lenny again.
Yes, hello Lenny.
And he's quite content.
We'll see if he hops off again in this episode. Shall we start with what is anxiety?
Sure.
All right, go.
So anxiety is our body's primitive response to danger, pretty much. So when we are in our rest and digest system, which is called our parasympathetic nervous system, that is where our body is doing all the systems that we need to kind of stay regulated and calm throughout our day. So it's all of our systems are working, our digestion's in place, our immunity's in place, all the things that our body needs to do are happening when we're in our rest and digest or parasympathetic nervous system. But what happens is when we start to feel like we're in danger, so back in primitive times it would have been a big saber-toothed lion's coming towards us, our body is going to go into its autonomic nervous system, which is our fight and flight response. So it's going to want us to get really activated, ready to either fight the big saber-toothed lion, tiger, or get the hell out of there, or we might momentarily freeze as we're deciding which one we're going to do. So what happens is the body is going to make those physiological changes and people are going to notice that in their body. So back in those times when we're in danger, or even kind of in current times, if we're in danger, we want our body to go into that system because that keeps us safe. But what's happening in modern times is people are having that reaction for things that aren't life-threatening. They're things like, I've got so much work on, how am I going to get all this done? Gosh, I've got that party to go to on the weekend, I don't want to go. And so all of these things that aren't really truly life-threatening or even really problematic for other people, for some people they can feel really overwhelming, and it brings their body into that state of fight and flight. Because essentially your brain doesn't know the difference between what you're telling it and what's really happening. So if you're telling your brain, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, your brain's just matching the chemistry to that message.
Okay, that makes sense. How do people know whether they have anxiety? Because that's, and we'll get into my story in a minute. Looking back, I didn't actually even know I had anxiety. So how does anxiety differ from like worry, like you're worried about something?
I think it can be quite prevalent. Like it can just come into your thoughts a lot. It can make you ruminate about that particular worry, and then you start noticing the physical symptoms. So once you're starting to notice the physical symptoms, that's going to differentiate from just your normal day-to-day, sort of moving through your day where you might be in whatever moods you're in, based on what's happening around you. This would be happening regardless of what's happening around you. It would be that you're kind of in your head thinking, gosh, I've got this on my plate and this on my plate, and it's not actually happening directly as a result from your environment. It's just coming from those thoughts and worries.
I remember as I started to figure out what was going on, I used to get like a bit of a tightening in the chest when it was really bad. And then in general, just like a sore tummy, like wouldn't feel hungry ever. Yeah. And we used to eventually joke about the anxiety diet because that's probably the skinniest I've ever been in my life. Yeah. Because I just never felt like eating because I always had like butterflies in my tummy. Is that?
Yeah, that's an anxiety symptom. So basically what happens is because your body is wanting to mobilize its resources almost, it's going to shut down or narrow the blood vessels around our organs because that's not needed. We're not needing to digest our food. We're not needing to have our immunity online. Like if I'm in a massive crisis, none of those systems are important. So all of that blood is evacuating from our organs and it's going into our arms, legs and extremities so that we can get the hell out of there if we're going to be, faced with that situation. So your body will try and evacuate your bowels and your bladder because it doesn't want to do the work of, processing those systems.
Yep. That is another symptom. Yes.
Yeah. And then, your heart's going to beat faster because you're bringing in, the blood flow is going to increase. You're wanting to really just get everything pumping. You're definitely not going to be hungry because that system's not necessary in that moment for you to, get the calories in to do things. It's trying to just use all of its resources to get you out of danger. And so any system that is not in that moment essential for that process, it is offline. So that's why even when people are having an argument and they escalate and they go into their fight and flight, no good can come from that conversation because that rational, reasonable part of your brain, it's offline.
Yeah.
Because if we're having that big tiger coming towards us, we don't need to reason with the tiger, rationalise with the tiger. We just want to get the hell out of there. So none of those systems that, are non-essential are going to be working at that time.
Yeah. I think this is an important concept for people to get their head around because I think it took me a little while to get my head around it. So from an evolutionary standpoint, our world has changed a phenomenal amount, but our bodies haven't evolved to catch up to that. So our bodies are still in caveman type mentality and function. And I do listen to some of the podcasts that you send me. Tracey sends me a lot of podcasts and I don't always listen. But I was listening to this one when I was walking Lenny this morning and the guy was saying that around that whole, and, again, it was the saber-toothed tiger example. And he was saying, you're designed to have that system, which might last 5 or 10 minutes while you're running away from the tiger, right? Because by then you're probably going to be safe or you might be eaten. But in the world that we operate today, and I know this because I used to just feel it almost 24/7, you're feeling it all the time.
Yeah, it's not switching off.
It's not designed to do that.
No. If you think about those nature documentaries where you watch the deer being chased by the lion, once they've gotten away from that danger, you don't see the deer looking around the corner, peering around, looking for, is there any sign of danger? No, that deer is switched off from that system now. They're eating the grass, they're calm and they're relaxed. So in that way, they're not depleting their system. They're using that function for survival, but they're able to just go back into their regular rest and digest system. So in our modern times, people aren't doing that. And so they're staying with this anxiety all day and they're releasing cortisol, they're releasing adrenaline, they're kind of running on those adrenals and they're actually depleting their system. And the more that you're running on those adrenals, the more that you're actually feeling really anxious all day. Again, back to those systems that are offline, that's when people get sick a lot because your immunity is not really online the whole time. Your body is not using those processes when it's in that anxious state. So your body's not getting that recovery and that repair that would be really helpful for your wellness.
Yeah. I guess we know the answer to this question, but how common is anxiety?
It's really, really common. I mean, the stats years ago used to be 1 in 3. I'm not sure what they currently are, but, I'm sure that most people have experienced anxiety at some times.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes anxiety can actually be helpful. It can, get us going. It can show that we care about something and we can perform really well sometimes with a bit of anxiety in there. We just don't want it to get to the point where it's freezing us and making us not be able to function properly.
Yeah. And I think that's where I got to. I agree about the point where having some sort of, like when I'm making a film, for example, I'll go through phases where I might be a little bit more anxious about something and it can fuel you to, like running away from the tiger, but I want to get this done and I want to get this edit finished or whatever it is. It can be helpful, but you can't live like that 24/7. No. What are some of the, I guess, common causes or triggers of anxiety?
It could be that kind of worst case scenario thinking. So if I give you an example, if someone had social anxiety, and it might be situational, it might be based on, you know, certain areas, but it could be that, say, an invitation comes in the mail for them, or, you know, nowadays it's probably on Facebook or something electronic, but say that comes through and they first see that, it could immediately trigger some sort of worry for them. They could think, oh God, I don't want to go to that party. I don't know anybody. What am I going to wear? Like, that could straight away start happening, or that could be delayed and it could be closer to the time when the party is actually going to happen. So some of the thinking could be exactly that. I'm not going to know anyone. What if I have no one to talk to? What if I look stupid? What if I look fat in the outfit I'm wearing? So some of these thinking starts creating the chemicals now in your brain that you start feeling like, that is a terrible idea, that party. That is just, I cannot face it. I cannot manage it. And then I'm going to go, no one's going to talk to me. Everyone's going to think I'm an idiot. Then I'm going to be embarrassed. And then I can't face these people ever again. So all of that kind of escalated thinking has led to a whole lot of chemicals being produced when there's actually no evidence for any of those things. And none of those things have actually happened. The party's not even occurred just yet, but yet all those chemicals and all that thinking has created that anxiety for that person.
So what can you do about it?
So you want to just be aware of that escalation of thinking. So sometimes it can happen so quickly in your mind that you won't realise that you've ended up at that worst case scenario, and the chemicals have just all caught up and you've started feeling anxious. So you really want to slow it all down. You want to slow down that thinking so that you can catch it. You know, writing it down can be a really good way to do that. You know, write down what that thinking is, because if you're writing something down like, no one's going to talk to me, then straight away you could almost challenge that and go, well, that's ridiculous that the host knows me and I do know 2 people that are going to the party, so I could talk to them. So straight away you can challenge that worry that you've had rather than just sitting with the worry. Because if you sit with the worry, you're just staying with those chemicals. But if you're challenging it, then now it's not making sense that you are still worried about that when you've actually proven that that's not correct.
I found one of the things, I should probably point out that being married to a counsellor, people would think, you know, like I would just be fixed immediately. And maybe we should should we get into my story a little bit? Now might be a good time. So I reckon I've had pretty severe bouts of anxiety twice in my life. I think the first time was I was thinking about this earlier, about 10 years ago. So I'm about to turn 46. So I was sort of turning 36. And that's when we had 2 babies. So how old would they have been, like toddlers at that age?
Yeah, 5 and 3 maybe.
And I was working in the corporate world and I'd sort of got a promotion. I was managing more people, and I was then answering to essentially the equivalent of the CEO. He wasn't called the CEO, but he was the CEO. And he was hard to work for. Like, he piled on the pressure. The company I was working for, sort of, when I started there, it was a big company, but it still had a family business type vibe, and it was transitioning to being much more corporate. And my personality doesn't necessarily suit being put in a box. And that's how I sort of felt. And you have to perform and you have to hit these numbers, and that was piling on the pressure. But I think what ultimately was causing me real stress was the fear of losing my job. And the reason I was scared of losing my job was because we had 2 little babies. And I guess that's a period of your life where not long before that, I was single. I had a mortgage, but it was a small mortgage in my little apartment. And I was earning enough money for me to go on holidays and live my little single life. And then I sort of had transitioned in a reasonably short period of time to being married, having 2 kids. We had built this house. We'd held on to my apartment and your old house. So we owed the bank a lot of money. And I was catastrophizing. Because I'm a creative person, my mind has the ability to really catastrophize things.
Give it the detail.
Real quick. And I was telling myself all these stories of, you know, losing the house. But then there's also the fear of not being the provider. And you were working at that point. But in my mind, it was just I didn't want to be a failure as a new father. And, you know, the fear of failing as a provider and as a father and as a husband. Then I think the other thing, and I don't know whether we've talked about this that much, but back then I didn't talk to you about it. And I remember not wanting to talk about it, which might seem crazy to people who are watching and listening, that you're married to a counsellor and you're just going to keep all this bottled up. But
Why do you think you kept it bottled up?
We're doing a role reversal, aren't we? You're going to be the interviewer, which is fine. I guess it would be upbringing and just the, like
Did it feel comfortable to talk about it?
Guy, I was scared. I was scared of talking about it. Like I would rather, I remember like it would be, right, just get home, try your best to forget about it for 10 hours or 12 hours or however long I was home for. And then, you can wake up tomorrow and face it again. And I wanted this to be my little sanctuary, but it never was, because you can't forget about it. You can't just turn the tap off and those feelings go away. But I was determined not to talk about it and just push through to the point where I think I said earlier in the show, I didn't realize I had it. And I remember, because I've always gone to the gym my whole adult life, lifting weights and whatever, you probably know by looking at me. And I remember going to the gym and just feeling knackered, like not having any energy. And I couldn't figure out why, because I'd still sleep. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and be awake for maybe an hour or two, but for the most part, I could still get 6 hours or 7 hours sleep. And I just couldn't connect the dots. And then it's hard to remember because it's 10 years ago, but I think it got so bad that I just felt I had no choice and I had to start talking to you about it. Because I would have been grumpy and snappy and we would have argued a lot, and we had 2 little kids and they were demanding, and there would have been so many times where I just felt I wasn't enjoying life.
Yeah.
And
but that's where also it can link in a little bit with low mood. So to me, you weren't enjoying your work, so that would have been the low mood kind of element coming in, but rather than you feeling like you could do something about that, whether it's change or speak up or whatever that might be, you didn't. And so then you started getting locked into the, oh my God, I'm going to do this forever, and how I'm going to keep this going, and what happens if I can't keep going? And so then you started getting the anxiety.
Yeah.
But really it would have started with not enjoying what you were doing.
Yeah.
So the other thing about that is people don't listen to their bodies. Your body was telling you, this is shit.
Yeah.
Like, this is not enjoyable. I'm not enjoying the culture. I'm not enjoying, my day to day. You were waking up feeling unwell, like you would feel sick, which is also another anxiety symptom because of all those butterflies and, the blood leaving that area.
Yeah.
So you would have been really dreading going to work. And so even the thoughts of that.
100%. And I can't remember which bout it was. It might have been both. And I'll get into the details of the second time I suffered from it. But I tell people this a lot just because I feel like if I talk about it and share it, it normalizes it for other people. But when you're asleep and then your brain wakes up, but your eyes are still closed. So even before I'd open my eyes, my brain would turn on. I'm awake, but my eyes are closed. And I could literally feel it coming. As soon as my brain's on, it's like, okay, let's start panicking. Let's start worrying about all the things that are going to go wrong. And I could feel it sort of coming down into my tummy, and it would be there all day. Yeah. And that's how I would start every day. Yeah. And then you'd kind of just get used to it, but eventually you reach breaking point.
To me, that's also where habits got formed. Your body would have gotten used to that set of chemicals and that set of thoughts, and therefore you would have driven yourself into that. I won't get into this on this podcast, but I definitely want to talk about in a different podcast about how we have so many of our patterns and our processes happening on an automatic basis. By the time that we're 35, we are doing 90 to 95% of our thoughts, behaviours, actions, all happening automatically without any thought. So that's an example of that you were sort of waking up in that period of time, and automatically your body's feeling that. Then your thoughts start happening as soon as you have that awareness.
Yep.
So in those ways, we want to really calm the body. We want to really regulate that nervous system to say, hey, we're safe, we're okay. Because as soon as you're moving into that fight and flight, you're going to have a lot of changes happening in the body. So that shallow breathing that people can recognise, where they're just really chest breathing, they're short and shallow and rapid, and that can often lead to panic attacks. When you're bringing in a lot of oxygen, people can feel that fizziness, that tingling in their body, and they can really be scared about that, because that can actually feel a bit like they're having a heart attack, but it's actually just too much oxygen coming in the system. So a way to counter that is we want to have that longer exhale, because when we're bringing in a lot of oxygen, we're actually sending the signal to the brain saying, hey, we're not okay here. We need to mobilize. So our body goes into that fight and flight with that breathing. So if we are having a longer exhale to dispel the buildup of carbon dioxide that we've just created, again, that's going to send the signal, all okay here. And we can turn that system off. So if, for example, we're breathing in for 6 seconds, so we could put our hand on our diaphragm and breathe into our hand, so we know we're bringing our breath deeper and lower, and even just bringing it in for 6 seconds. And if you were doing a really slow exhale, you could get to 10 seconds on the exhale. But my super secret trick that everyone that knows me hears me talk about is humming. So humming is...
Can I just interrupt? You come in this house, you spend more than 10 minutes in this house, you're going to hear Tracey hum. You hum all the time.
I know.
Everywhere.
I know.
You can be standing there, that's where our kitchen is, right there. Headphones on, just humming.
I know.
You have a bath, humming. In the bedroom, humming.
I do it in the car when no one's around too.
Oh, it doesn't surprise me. But I think there's a learning in there for people. Like, you practice what you preach. Like, you learn this stuff, and another episode will get into how you've fixed your back. The amount of effort you put into fixing your back, the amount of effort you put into, if you learn something, you're going to do it. So it's commendable, the commitment that you have in this case to humming. Go on.
I do annoy everyone with the humming. I will say that.
Oh, yeah, it's annoying. Yeah.
The kids always comment about my humming. I do drive them crazy. But let me tell you the science behind that. So when we're humming, we can definitely extend that exhale even longer. So where I said before, 6 seconds in, 10 seconds for the exhale, I could get to 20 seconds if I'm humming. It's really reducing that exhale to such small amounts that I could really bring that down to a 20 or even longer, really. But the other thing that happens with that is we are releasing 15 times more nitric oxide in our system when we're doing that. And the reason why that's really helpful is because that's going to open up our blood vessels and allow that blood flow again. So when we're in fight and flight, our blood vessels constrict and we're taking the blood flow away from the organs. And again, that's why those processes are shutting down, and we're sending them, all the blood flow to the arms and legs and, things that we want to get the hell out of there. So by opening up those blood vessels and flowing again, we're coming back into that regulated system.
Yep.
So humming is a great way to do that. Vocal toning, if you think about even what people do with babies, I'll do it with Lenny because he's my little baby, but it's kind of like that shh, even those kind of things where it's a longer exhale just with the shushing, and that's what we do with babies. We're calming the system, we're calming them, we're calming us. So the other thing about humming is through that vibration, it really can relax the system as well. So that's why I use humming so much. Even with my breath works, I'll try and do hummings on the exhales.
And you said, I've heard you say the phrase vocal toning so many times, and I still actually don't know what it is. What is vocal toning?
It's kind of using the humming and the different tones, and some people might use chanting and mantras and things like that, but it's using the voice, it's using the vibration that's going to calm the system. And again, it's actually activating the vagus nerve as well. The vagus nerve is the nerve that connects the mind and the body, and it covers 85% of our organs. The first point of connection is our vocal cords, and so that vocal toning, humming, chanting is going to activate that.
So is there anything else that you can do to sort of help regulate your body or your system?
Yeah. So again, breath work or your breathing is really, really important. So back to that regulated breath, we want to bring that right into our diaphragm, but we don't want to have really deep breaths. Like people will say, sit down and breathe deeply. We don't want to bring in more of that oxygen if someone's already feeling, a little bit fuzzy and tingly in their system. So instead it's about regulating that breath. If you've ever seen those movies on TV where they give a kid a paper bag and they're breathing out of that, that's just regulating the amount of, air that they can bring in. So there's a technique called box breathing, or there's a breath type called box breathing, where essentially we're breathing in and then we're holding and then we're breathing out and then we're holding. And so basically between every in-breath and an out-breath, we would be having a pause. So that's really regulating it. And it doesn't matter how many seconds you do in. So for example, you could go in for 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, hold, out for 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, hold. So we're just holding between every in-breath and out-breath, and that just regulates your system. You could do that sort of 5 or 6 times. That's a way of calming the actual, your body down. In terms of, that chatter that's going on in our brain that's causing the chemicals in the first place because we're thinking we're in danger, we actually want to interrupt that thinking. So going back to that thinking around the party that we were just mentioning, we would want to interrupt at the first point of, I'm not going to know anybody. That's the challenge straight away. So they could do that by writing that down. If they didn't feel like they could challenge the actual situation in that moment, they were too activated, they might just want to change their thinking with a neutral thought. And what I mean by that is we want to change it to something completely different than what they were thinking about, so that those chemicals are no longer being produced. So we actually do this with our kids. This is called the alphabet game.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually a grounding technique is what the technical term for it is, but we just call it the alphabet game for our kids.
And to clarify, this is when
you're feeling activated, you're feeling anxious, it could even be if you're in a bad mood, but again, it's just something to interrupt the thoughts and stop those chemicals being produced. So if someone's feeling a bit distressed, or you can see that they're not doing okay, you could ask them to play this game or to answer these questions. So just using the alphabet, you're just asking someone either a food or a song title or a suburb, just anything that they're going to be able to work through the alphabet and answer those questions. When we were doing that with the kids when they were little, and they couldn't spell, so that was tricky, but we would just do it with people's names.
Yeah.
Because they would usually be able to sound out somebody's name.
Yeah.
And usually after a few goes of it, so we can do it. I'll do it with you. We can do suburbs if you like.
Okay.
So give me a suburb starting with, actually, first of all, think about something that you usually don't like thinking about.
Okay.
Have you got something?
Yep.
Okay. And now tell me a suburb starting with A.
Applecross.
B.
Bicton.
C.
Craigie.
D.
Duncraig.
E.
Is it one called Embleton? Something like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. F.
Oh, that's trickier. This is going to be so irrelevant to people who don't live in Perth.
But it's just showing.
But anyway, yeah. I can't think of one with F. But usually I would say by the time we got to F, the kids...
Their mood's changed. They're already shifting out of it.
Yeah.
So what we would do is, and the reason why we want someone to get stumped, I don't want you to go through going, oh yeah, Applecross, Bicton, and being able to rattle them all off, because you'll be able to hold on to what you're thinking about. It's only once you get to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, F, what the hell? I can't even think of that.
Yeah.
That you kind of have to push back the thing that you were thinking about before that was causing you to be upset. And now you're putting all your energy into, gosh, what is F? So then that's a more neutral thought. You're creating those chemicals now instead of that worry.
Well, the funny thing is, all I've been thinking about is F, which is Fremantle.
Yeah.
But definitely that's what my focus shifted to. And if you can shift your focus...
then you're creating different chemicals.
Yeah.
So you want to interrupt it. And you can do that with people, you can do it for yourself. And it's really quick, because most people won't be able to get, sort of a third of the way through before they've kind of calmed themselves down, because it might be tricky enough. Even when you're asking yourself the question, you're going, what's the next letter after this? And then you're having to do that process. So essentially, when we can do two things at once, we could keep that thinking going. But as soon as we have to do a task that's, we've got to concentrate more, then we have to shut that thinking down, focus on what it is. So that's why even when you're doing a task, so for me, it would be on the computer. Anytime I'm on the computer, I can't be talking to somebody, I can't be being distracted, but you're pretty good on the computer, so you probably could multitask and do the two things at once.
Yeah.
But not for me.
That's one of the jobs in our marriage is
computer stuff.
I'm the tech guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Shall we wrap up my part one of my story?
Sure.
Because the irony of the whole thing is I didn't learn my lesson. And so I remember getting to a point, because I feel like sometimes to make change, you have to hit kind of rock bottom. And I think anxiety-wise, like I had an amazing life. Like from the outside looking in, my life was fantastic.
Can I just say you don't have to hit rock bottom?
Okay.
You have to hit a point where you go, I don't want to do this anymore.
Okay, yes, that's probably a better way to say it. Yeah. And that's where I was. Yeah, I'm sure I could have gone lower, but I hit a point where I was like,
this is enough.
Yeah, I've had enough of this now. But what I did is I just changed my situation. So I remember talking to you, and being married to you is amazing for lots of reasons, but one of those reasons is you're very supportive of me wanting to do different things and try different things. And so for whatever reason, I knew that I didn't want to just go and get another job. I knew I wanted to quit the job that I had. Whether it was bravery or ignorance or whatever it was.
Desperation.
But I knew I didn't want to just go and work somewhere else.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to go and do my own thing. So I changed my circumstances, quit the job. You were very good in supporting me and allowing me to do that and to start my own business. And I had a business partner. And as soon as I changed those circumstances, I wasn't anxious, and I had probably a really good, definitely a good 12 months. Mm-hmm. After the 12 months, running my own business, the same stresses were kind of there financially, and I started falling back into those old habits of, oh my God, I got to win this client, got to get this money, got to do this, got to do that. And on top of that, because I think the second time round was even worse than the first time round, on top of all that, I had a massive fear of failure. So if the business failed, how would that look to our friends, to our family, to you, to the kids? And it was really, really difficult. And all the same feelings came back.
Yes.
And because I hadn't learned my lessons the first time round, I just changed my situation. Didn't have any of the tools. I think the one thing I probably did the second time round was talk to you more. I think I'd learned that by opening up and explaining why I was in a bad mood or grumpy, I probably got a bit better at that. But I was still not in a good way and was waking up feeling anxious, going through my whole day feeling anxious and going to sleep feeling anxious. And so it wasn't really until... and the other thing that I thought about this before we started the show, the other thing I wanted to mention to people was that... So I had the fear of failure, but then after I'd been running my business for about 3 years, we spoke about, well, just properly go out on your own. And this is ultimately how I ended up getting into filmmaking. And I spoke to my business partner about wanting to leave, and because of tax implications, blah, blah, blah. There was a bunch of reasons why. And I remember she told me on the phone, and I think this is the worst I've ever felt. She goes, "You can't leave." And so that feeling of being, when you're feeling horrendous, and then you add feeling trapped on top of that, I remember we live across the road from a park. I was walking around the park, because I used to go on these, what I called anxiety walks, where that was one of the things that helped, was just getting out in nature. But I was on the phone to her, and she said that, and I just felt so trapped. And that was the worst I've ever felt. And so it was at that point, and again, the craziness of living with you and not tapping into you. But I want to explain that to people is being your husband makes it a little bit trickier for whatever reason to also be a client. You might have views on that, but our whole lives.
Well, you can't.
Yeah, I can't.
You can't counsel
Yeah.
someone that you know really, really well. So while I can give you tips and I can point things out, or I can help you challenge some of your thoughts, we're not sitting down for an hour and doing a session like I would in the office with somebody else.
Yeah. So it was the irony of the whole thing was you reach that point where you go, I can't do this anymore. So this is now 3 years after the first time I reached that point. This time, I think a couple of the things that I did that looking back were really, really game changers was I did a 3-day course. It was called Landmark. It was like a self-help kind of thing. And I got myself a life coach, which is essentially kind of looking back very similar to getting a counselor or therapist or whatever. And he would have told me all the things that you would have told me, but
He did. He just told you different wording.
Different wording.
You would come home and I'd be like, oh, that's like when I told you blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Yeah. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't hear it from you. I
that's
needed
okay.
to hear it from someone else.
Yeah, sure.
And I started listening to podcasts, and the big game changer was actually educating myself about what it is, why it's happening to me, and then providing. And again, so if you're listening to this, you've taken a massive first step. This is how I got out of that situation, was you understand what it's all about, how it impacts you, and then you can start learning ways to get over it.
Yeah. One thing you said in there that was really good was about that walk that you used to go on and being out in nature. Because when we're present to our environment, then again, we've postponed all that thinking. Like you being in nature and you being able to look around at whatever's surrounding you that's beautiful, it's actually very good for your system as well, like in terms of, just the health of that, of being out in nature and breathing in the oxygen and things. But it's more about being away from the busyness of everything, of the to-do lists and I've still got to do this, this and this. Hopefully when you're in nature, you're just kind of looking around and seeing the beauty of it all.
Yep.
And they often say about, our different states that if we're truly present, then we're quite content, because if we were in danger right now, then our body would be in that system, but that's accurate. That's appropriate, because we are in danger in this one moment. But if we are present and we're calm, we are safe. But when we're ruminating on the past, that's when we can get low mood, because we're thinking, oh, coulda, shoulda, woulda, and having those regrets, or feeling bad about things that have happened. And then if we're in our future and we're worrying about things that haven't happened yet, then we're in our anxiety.
Yeah.
And we're actually not being present. So mindfulness is another one of those big things people talk about a lot nowadays.
Yes.
And that's just, again, postponing that worry of what's going to happen in the future, which we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. So I heard another saying, which I really like, and I say this to you sometimes, to worry is to experience it twice.
Yes.
Because if it's going to happen, you're going to have the worry then. You often sometimes will delay you being excited about something. Yeah. Because you'll think, oh, what if it doesn't happen? Or, you'll have that thinking around it rather than just going, well, let me just enjoy this feeling now and being present to it.
That's a huge one. And I remember, like my life coach used to say, we'd talk about stuff that were making me anxious, and he would say something along those lines, like it hasn't happened yet. And I would argue a bit with him, and he would always say like, well, if you're worrying about it now and it hasn't happened, how's that working out for you? It used to annoy me. So I'm like, well, obviously it's not working out very well. That's why I'm sitting here. But it took me forever to figure it out. And that's the other thing is the main thing. And again, if you're listening or watching this, you're on the road, there comes a point where you have to do the work. And the work is ongoing. And I still do lots of things ongoing, and I'm not anxious anymore. I still have times where I feel the feeling of anxiety. Yeah. But I've learned so much of this stuff now over the years that I can manage a lot of those things. Once you figure this out, I think it's a no-brainer. But before you figure it out, you don't know what you don't know. The voice in your head is not always right.
No.
In most cases, it's not right. And in my case, mine was, I can catastrophize really quickly, as I said, and I can get to the point of, I'm going to lose this client, this client, this client, we're going to lose the house, we're going to be living on the street, blah, blah, and it happens like that. What you were saying is you have to challenge
that?
The voice in your head.
Yeah. Because could you imagine if I was the equivalent of your voice in your head, but it's coming from me, Tracey, and I'm walking around all day going, careful, you're going to ruin that client, or you're going to lose that client, or you're going to lose our money, or what's going to happen if we don't pay the bills, and da-da-da, and I was doing that, you would want to turn around and yell at me. You would be like, get away from me.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you do get those people in life, they're negative,
Yep.
where, you know, you feel like that. You could tell a friend a really good story and they're telling you all the negative things that are going to happen.
Yep.
So that's what people feel like in their heads the whole time. Sometimes people can work on certain anxieties, but their body has actually gotten so used to that chemical concoction of adrenaline and cortisol that they seek it out. So I have a client where I've done loads of work with her around her different anxieties. And so she'll be feeling quite calm. And then all of a sudden she'll notice that she's scanning her environment, looking for something to worry about.
Oh, yeah, I do that. Yeah.
So
and it's not necessarily my environment. I now compliment my brain, right? Because if I'm having an amazing day or an amazing week or whatever, my brain will still find, not necessarily what I'm looking at, but it'll just find something to worry about. And now I've gotten into the habit, again, because what your little voice in your head says is very often wrong. I would go, well done for being creative. Like you've for a pretty amazing life that you've got going on here, you've still found something to worry about. So kudos to you, little voice.
Being clever, yep.
Very smart and you're very creative. But it's having that awareness to, like you said, with your other client, to just shut it down. Mm. And that's where, like, dialing it back to what I was saying when my life coach would be like, you know, how's that working out for you? And it used to bother me. Now I understand that, I could choose to follow that thought path of catastrophizing whatever it is my brain has come up with to worry about. Mm. I just then make a conscious choice to go, I guess I could spend the next half an hour, day worrying about that thing that is very unlikely to happen, or I can nip it in the bud now and go, no, I'm not even entertaining that. Mm. And you can do that. Yeah. It takes a bit of practice. Yeah. But you can do it.
Even trying to look at what you're thinking is the worst case scenario and challenging that and going, is that likely? Like, what would the chances be?
That's a big one.
You know, of that happening. Because even when you're saying about the lose the house, like there's a lot of steps you missed there.
Yes.
Like, you jumped. We didn't put the mortgage on hold. We didn't talk to the bank. We didn't do any of those steps that would be actually the case if that was going to play out. Yep. You just straight away went to that worst case scenario, and then your brain reacts in that fear response, like shit. Yes. We're going to lose the house. And so again, back to your brain being so clever, our brain will believe whatever you tell it. And that's why, you know, you could reminisce about a funny story from 20 years ago with your friends and you would take yourself right back there and laugh and get all the same chemicals. But you can do the same with a fear or a worry, or if I was to talk through a fight that we had, I'm going to create all those same chemicals. So our brains are really, really powerful. And if we don't challenge it, it'll just sit in the background and create that for us.
Yeah. We've been going for a little while. Do we want to finish with some tips, or is there other stuff that you want to cover?
Maybe just some tips. So kind of just going over what I was saying before around we want to try and regulate our nervous system when we are feeling anxious. So we can do things like, breath work, humming, even trying to get that energy out a little bit, like maybe by going for a walk or doing some exercise or something to try and release, that energy that you're feeling in your body when you're feeling anxious. Because again, you want to have that fight and flight. It's no good just saying, hey, just go and sit down and calm down. That's why I think breath work can be good, because you're actually using the breath to do something with that energy. But again, exercise is really, really helpful for that. Yep. Leaves people feeling really, really good. But again, using that energy in a purposeful way. We can use grounding techniques. So I mentioned about the grounding technique of the alphabet game and challenging, just interrupting that thinking. But we can also do other ones where you could close your eyes and listen for 5 things that you can hear. Oh, yep. And so by identifying the different sounds, again, you're trying to interrupt that thinking because you're trying to identify, what is that sound? How do I describe that? you're putting yourself back in your environment. You could think about, what are 5 things I'm touching right now? So, I'm sitting on a chair right now. So we're thinking my arms against the chair, my hands on Nenny's back. You're really bringing yourself back into your body. So we want to bring ourselves out of our head and back into our body. You could stomp your feet, you could clench your hands. Anything that's bringing you back into your body is going to, reduce some of that thinking. And challenging that thinking as well, I think, is really important. So writing it down can be really helpful, because the other thing about anxiety that can happen is we might have one worry. So for you, it could be, oh, what if I, lose my job? And then, then what happens if I lose the house? And, Tracey might be unhappy with me and she might leave me. And you might have all of these thoughts whirling around, and they link together. Yeah. And so you finish one thought, then you link to the next, then you link to the next. Yes. And you're just actually saying the same things over and over to yourself.
Yeah, and it gets confusing. Yeah. I used to do that all the time. Like, it's snowballing.
Yeah.
And the thoughts don't even become rational.
No, they're not rational. And they're all linking together. So what we want to do is, again, pen and paper, separate them out and go, what's my worry about this? Is that reasonable? What's my challenge for that? How can I poke holes in that to make it not be true? Yep. Or likely, Yep. So anything that's going to make that not be valid,
yep.
Because again, if you had a friend come up to you and say, oh my gosh, guess what, blah, 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 in your head you'd be like, oh gosh, she's such a worrywart, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But in our head, we're not doing that. We're just sitting with the worry.
Because you always think what you're saying in your head is right.
Yeah.
I have a little bonus tip, which I think we talked about in episode 1, is gratefulness. Mm-hmm. So, one of the other tips is educate yourself. That's my biggest one, is learn what's going on, and then you can challenge it.
Can I say, learn what's going on for you, because your anxiety might feel different than your friend's anxiety and things. So just sort of recognizing, what are you noticing in your body? What are the things that trigger you? So trying to identify your triggers is really important.
Yep. Do you want to clarify what triggers might be?
So triggers would be, you're moving through your day and then all of a sudden something's happened that's made you not feel so great. And so a way that I can get people to sort of identify what they're saying to themselves that's caused the anxiety is using feeling sheets. Mm-hmm. So they're on our website. We can get people to identify, as soon as they feel like they've gone from that calm, regulated space to not feeling so good, that would be something's triggered that.
Yep.
Something's happened for that to give them such a not nice feeling or thought. So what I get people to do is have a think about, what you're feeling in this moment. So you might write those things down. What's just triggered that? Oh, I just got a text message. Or it could be that a thought just popped into your head. It doesn't have to actually be an action or something's just happened. It could just be a thought or a reminder that you're saying to yourself, I've got to go do such and such tonight and I really don't want to go to that. Yep. But it's whatever's just happened. And then the most important bit, in fact, I don't care about the feelings, I don't care about the whatever, it's the most important thing is, what did I say to myself about that?
Yeah, okay.
Because that interpretation has created the chemicals.
Yep.
So if we didn't interpret it that way, the chemicals would be different.
Yep.
So we want to see what we're saying to ourselves. That's one, because I find that people aren't even realising what they're saying to themselves. They're moving about their day with this kind of chattering in the background, and it could almost be like a mild anxiety all day. So we want to be aware of that.
Shall I say my one?
Yeah.
The gratefulness one. Well, absolutely. What Tracy's already said, like a big thing was I used to get out in nature. I would put on a podcast. One that I really loved because I found it soothing was Oprah.
I knew you were going to say Oprah.
And it is called Super Soul Sunday by Oprah Winfrey. And there's heaps of different episodes and stuff, but it was almost like one sentence. She was interviewing a guest. I can't remember which one it was, but because she has lots of good ones. And they said the feeling of anxiety or the emotion of anxiety cannot exist in your head at the same time as gratefulness. So if you want to get a little break and in the last episode we talked to her, I would write down each morning 3 things that I was grateful for. They don't go together. So if you can even if it's just 5 minutes, to give yourself a little 5-minute break, you can get into gratefulness, and then that'll grow and grow. And you'll keep figuring it out. And then eventually you'll get into the habit of looking for things to be grateful for. And I can't remember if I said this on the last episode, but Mark Burris, the guy who, the business guy, I think he was the host of The Apprentice, he said something once where if you imagine a little piggy bank And as you're going through your day, if something good happens or you notice something, it might be your kid gives you a cuddle. You go, oh, that was nice. You pop that, you bank it mentally. You go, I'm grateful for that little cuddle. You pop it in your little gratefulness mental piggy bank, and you keep adding to it during the day. I've heard someone else refer to it as pocketfuls of happiness. Like your whole day is not going to be amazing and happy, but if you can find little
micro moments.
Yeah. And that's it. It's not rocket science, but it's having the awareness and the discipline maybe to be onto it.
Yeah, and that will interrupt that feeling. Like if you are in those micro moments and things, it's interrupted the thinking, it's giving your body a break.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, we could talk about this all day, but I think we'll wrap it up here. And if people have comments or you want us to explore another avenue of this on another episode, I'm more than happy to do that.
There's loads more grounding techniques and strategies and things that we could talk about, but that's probably a good start for today.
Beautiful. All right, good job. We talked about feeling sheets, so we'll make sure the feeling sheets are on the website. So that's traceyquayle.com. If you want to follow Tracey, because Tracey gives tips and advice on social media, it's at traceyquayle.therapy, which is Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If you happen to be on LinkedIn and you want to follow Tracey, and then just look up her name, Tracey Quayle, and you can follow her on LinkedIn. I think that's all the places. We also have a mailing list. So if we send out a fortnightly newsletter with tips and advice. So if you want to jump on there on traceyquayle.com, you'll see the little form and you can join our mailing list. Beauty. What are we going to talk about in the next episode? I think, is it vision for the future?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
I'll talk to you then.
Thank you. Good job.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.